Hi and welcome to the TM Forum's webinar, Building Digital Services Growth with Next Generation BSS. Today we have a star-studded cast ready to help you through what has been for many quite a digital storm. I'm Tony Poulos, I'm the market strategist at the TM Forum, and I'm here to help run the agenda today. We'll have following me Teresa Cottam from Telexperience. She's the Director of Research there, talking about monetising digital services. And then we'll have Gary Disley, the Director of Marketing from Aircom, talking about MDS solutions for the Aircom business. And at the very end there we have Matt Hooper, who's the Chief Marketing Officer at MDS, who'll be talking about unlocking the potential for BSS, for growth. Now, it's very interesting, this whole area of digital services has been perplexing some operators for some time. The TM Forum has been spending quite a bit of time working on it and helping people to get through what's commonly known as the digital storm. Our role and mission is really to help people to take up the opportunity to monetize, package, and launch new service offerings focused on key market segments. And of course, that need has never been so great. However, legacy business systems in particular are often the bottleneck for enabling and launching simple converged service offerings. Those are the ones that can assure the best and greatest customer experience. At the TM Forum, we're working with our members to resolve these business and operational challenges and show how best to enable end-to-end management across some pretty complex new value chains. The promise of new network technologies, however, such as LTE, will succeed or fail on the ability to drive the service offerings over the network and through the business systems themselves. Next Generation BSS can solve a lot of the key issues and does not have to mean costly and high-risk IT transformation projects. You can see the key business issues here that we are focusing on right now. The TM Forum is actively addressing what best practices and processes are available to CSPs to help them cope with the demands of delivering seamless digital services and being able to monetize them accurately and in real time. Here are some of the guides already published that our members have been using, and they're all available to you as well. Probably one of the most exciting part of our operations is what we call the Catalyst program. Constant updates are being achieved through our collaboration programs and hothouses, but catalysts are bringing together leading operators and vendors sharing views and experiences on how best to deliver the new services. I've got a couple of examples here for you, and these are ones that are coming up at our Digital Disruptions 2013 event that will be held in San Jose at the end of October. It'll give you a taste of what's happening. The first one, Digital Services from Cloud Service Providers, is a project that focuses on how to leverage service provider infrastructure and to provide digital services in an Amazon-like manner. This team will strive to create a full working model that will be shown in San Jose. Secondly, the managing digital services in a multi-partner, multi-line of business context. This team is working on the catalyst that will focus on the challenges that arise for revenue sharing, trouble management, and provisioning of digital services that's delivered and managed through multiple partners or lines of business. Several use cases will be used to illustrate these challenges at the event in San Jose as well. And thirdly, the digital services operations in a multi-provider environment catalyst will demonstrate carrier-grade management of a digital service designed, deployed, and operated in a multi-provider environment, and following the life cycle of that service from design right through to fulfillment. As well, we've released a series of research papers, including one specifically on digital life, which you can see here, and our very popular perspectives, which this time is chock full of real-life scenarios, case studies on concepts to guide us through the digital storm. But enough from me. It's time to hand off to the first of our fantastic speakers for today's webinar, Teresa Cottam. She's the Director of Research at Telexperience, and she's going to help cover how best to find that early value from 4G digital services. Teresa, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tony. So today I'm going to give you a brief introduction to some of our research and thoughts around monetizing new superfast networks such as LTE. For those of you who'd like to get some more detail on this, we've got 2 new white papers that are available, and you can download those for free from the MDS website. One's on SME strategies and another on monetization of LTE. As for the rest of the data I'm going to present to you today, if you'd like to get a copy of the research papers that's based on, then feel free to email us at editorial@telesperience.com and you can get a free copy of that as well. So I'm going to start by looking at some of the market conditions. Telecoms has historically been seen as a very steady and sometimes even a spectacular performer as regards to the returns it provides to its investors. However, there's a sort of storm, a perfect storm, that's resulting in tough trading conditions across many world markets, but particularly in Europe, which is causing impatience from our investors and shareholders, and even the first signs that they're starting to complain and get concerned. As we can see from this diagram, CSP's profit margins are being squeezed between many factors that are suppressing their ability to increase their revenues. And on the other hand, there are other factors that are increasing costs. And if we just take a few of these, regulatory action, for example, has seen mandates to decrease roaming charges in the EU, which used to be a lucrative revenue stream for many CSPs. On the other hand, saturation means that there are very few new customers to sell to, and what that means is we need to sell more to existing customers. Now, to sort of make this more solid, Arthur D. Little, an equity broker, Exane BNP Paribas, actually calculated that European operators need to raise their ARPUs to around €17 a month for this sector to return to growth. And currently, the level's about, €7 below that. It's about €10 a month. So in other words, they need to find substantial incremental new revenue streams in order to make up this shortfall. At the same time, we have rising debt piles in the European telecoms market, and LTE is just adding to those, actually. Although it's seen as a big hope in the industry, the risk is that in the short term it could actually become an albatross around our necks. And that's because there are huge upfront costs that need to be recouped and a relatively weak focus on how these costs are going to be recovered in the short term. So as a nod to our Irish colleagues who are joining us from Aircom, I'd like to just draw your attention to something George Bernard Shaw said. And bear in mind, this is somebody that's been dead for over 60 years, and yet how prophetic are these words? I mean, what he says is it's not making the mistakes that's the issue, it's repeating the same mistakes. And if we apply this to an LTE context, what it means is that CSPs cannot and shouldn't make the same mistakes that they did with 3G, which, as we all know, took a very long time to monetize in Europe. You'll recall how CSPs tried to sell 3G on technical attributes such as speed and failed to stir up sufficient interest among customers for quite a long time. But when 3G rolled out, CSPs were in a much better position than they are today. And this time around, they just can't afford to wait several years to build sufficient demand. Yet the signs are that many are taking exactly the same approach as they did the last time and expecting different results. And this begins with a build it and they will come mindset, which means that often they lack a clear idea of who their customer is going to be. Neither do we think they should be asking, who do I want to sell to? What we think they should be asking is, who needs these services and has the ability and the willingness to pay? And yet again, if you look at these advertisements, what you see is that the main selling point of LTE, despite confusion, lack of interest, and to be frank, weariness and distrust around speed, around it is speed. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look at the ads, one for 3G and the other for 4G, both emphasize speed. But as we know, speed is a relative concept and is hard for customers to grasp as an absolute, or for many of them to justify paying more for. They've also been trained by the CSPs and the equipment providers to be very skeptical of speed, a point reinforced by the fact that the Advertising Standards Agency here in the UK banned an iPhone 3 advert that claimed it was really, really fast, which doesn't sound too outrageous, but the ASA actually banned it from being shown because it said it was misleading. In its defense, Apple UK said it was comparing the 3G model with its 2G predecessor, and its claims were relative, not absolute, which rather goes to prove my point. So we agree that speed is relative, not absolute, as the speed you need largely depends on the service you're using and your expectations. But what such advertising has done is convince customers that speed is not all it might be advertised as being. Another key issue here is, should you charge a premium for LTE? There's a temptation to think that because you've invested a lot of money in LTE networks, you need to recapture this immediately by raising prices for a cost recovery exercise. While this is certainly the norm in Europe, all it does is make the move to LTE harder for customers to justify, and it delays uptake and the other benefits of LTE, as well as the ability to increase revenues through incremental charges for things that customers do want. High initial pricing not only deters the mass market adoption, it's also increasingly unsustainable. In the UK, for example, we're in the middle of a 4G rollout here, and the CEO of 3 UK announced that his company would charge the same for 4G as for 3G just after EE launched with high initial prices. Now, clearly that was a spoiler, but it's also fundamentally a different strategy. Importantly, how do 3's competitors sustain or justify high prices in the face of that statement? So if LTE monetization is far from straightforward and yet vital, where should CSPs start? Well, let's begin by looking at who the customer is for LTE and who has the willingness and the propensity to pay. Traditionally, there's been an enormous focus in the European mobile industry on B2C services, where the target customer has typically been the 18 to 30-year-olds. However, this is the very sector that's been hardest hit by the economic downturn. For example, Spain lost 5% of its mobile customer base last year, or 2.7 million lines, and it has youth unemployment hitting 55%. So how is the mobile industry in this type of market going to persuade its target customers to spend more? And of course, Spain's not the only European market in that situation. So to go back to those Arthur D. Little and Exane BNP Paribas figures, how will European operators raise ARPUs by at least €7 above their current levels? CSPs need to find an awful lot of incremental services to monetize in order to make up such a shortfall. And if the money isn't going to come from consumers, where will it come from? So the other sector of the mobile economy is, of course, businesses. European CSPs, and indeed CSPs worldwide, have identified the business sector, and in particular the SME sector, the small, medium-sized enterprise sector, as offering enormous growth potential. So just to give you some concept of the scope here for growth, the standard EU definition of a SME is a company with up to 250 employees. That's over 99% of EU businesses. There are 19.2 million micro-businesses in the EU, 1.4 million small businesses, 200,000 medium-sized businesses, and only 43,000 large enterprises. According to Telesperience research, the average European business has 6 employees and 2.3 communication service providers. And in other research that we did, we found that the average large enterprise has 3.8 service providers. At the same time, many businesses would actually prefer to have a single service provider, a single throat to choke. SMEs in particular have been identified as an underserved and underpenetrated sector by CSPs, which would benefit from new technologies and modes of technological delivery, such as the cloud. However, they've tried before to profitably address this market, and they failed. And there's a number of key problems that remain in addressing this sector profitably. Firstly, they often don't know who the SME customer is, as they're hidden on the consumer stack on consumer accounts. This means that the CSP is not able to target them with business-oriented services, so finding the customer is the first challenge. Once the customer has been identified, there's still a requirement to understand and meet their needs. These are often significantly different to those of large enterprises, and trying to address the market as though it's a cut-down version of a large enterprise just won't work. Segmenting the market in order to address these needs is much more challenging than simply the size of the spend. And this is where the key concept of verticalization comes into play, which is the ability to create packages for specific vertical markets. Another issue is, what's the customer experience going to be like? How do you create an experience that's attractive and keeps these B2B customers, the smaller ones, happy, but is still sustainable for CSPs? And you might like to know that a number of CSPs have commented to me, as we've worked with them on strategy, that there really isn't a concept of customer experience in the B2B world like there is in the B2C world. And incidentally, these were B2B specialist providers that commented this. And that doesn't mean that delivering a good customer experience in this sector is any less important. There's also 2 types of opportunity here. Telesperience defines the B2B opportunity as being about helping businesses become more operationally efficient, for example, supporting their productivity. However, there's also a B2B2C opportunity, which is about helping businesses to improve their relationship with their customers and helping them to sell more to their end customers. And this introduces new requirements, and it's not an area that CSPs are traditionally very adept at themselves. So it's an area where they're going to have to work a bit harder. And trust is also a vital consideration. It's all very well citing lots of stats about that say that CSPs are trusted. The question is, trusted for what? Trust is not an absolute like speed. It's something that's contextual, and the question is, are CSPs trusted to provide the services which may be mission critical that they've identified as offering revenue growth and opportunity? And remember, every bill shock event undermines the trust customers have in their CSP. And Telesperience has been recording bill shock events for some time, and we've noticed a high number of bill shock events in the SME sector recently because of the hybrid nature of these accounts, and it's a rising problem actually. So let's go on to some good news. The good news is that in our research amongst CSPs worldwide, we studied 50 CSPs, and 18 of these were major European CSPs, and we found that every single European CSP we spoke to saw the SME sector as a growth opportunity. And of these, 56% see it as a significant growth opportunity. 9 out of 10, however, admit they're not meeting the needs of SMEs today, with 44% saying that SMEs have substantial unmet needs. So how do they intend to meet the needs of these SMEs? Well, they have a wide range of plans, as you would expect, but there's 4 key things that they intend to do. The first strategy CSPs intend to offer is verticalization. This means offering a bundle or package of services that are tailored to the needs of a particular vertical market. This is a sustainable way of offering tailoring to a mass market like SME. However, as can be seen from the graph, although European CSPs are beginning to verticalize their offers, they're still way behind North America, where over 8 out of 10 CSPs can already offer some level of verticalization. So there's a way to go on that strategy. The second key strategy around SMEs that CSPs have is to explicitly manage them. So I mentioned earlier that a lot of them are currently lost on the consumer stack. Well, about half of the European CSPs now explicitly manage their SMEs and have a program to do that. And about a third are developing this kind of program. And that means that 8 out of 10 will have this type of program in the very near future. And we think this is really important because SMEs are not like mini enterprises. They do need a different approach to make this opportunity work and to make it profitable. What's more, for many CSPs, SMEs are not supported on a dedicated stack, meaning that they're lost, and that stack might not have the capabilities to support complex business services. Developing a SME program requires the CSP to decide how SMEs will be supported in terms of their BSS OSS infrastructure. And because of the urgency to roll out these programs, they're really keen to make some additional revenue out of these customers. And because of the sometimes experimental nature of it, they're not sure where the demand is and whether they'll be able to make money out of it. There is some hesitancy about spending large sums up front, and that's why it's ideal to adopt either a managed services or cloud-based approach to support this kind of program. So CSPs have a wide range of ideas about things they'd like to sell to SMEs. And as you can see from this graph, security services and enterprise apps are very high on the list. 9 out of 10 either offer or are planning to offer this kind of service. And storage and cloud-based apps are also areas that CSPs are keen to support. Many of these services are going to be charged in a different way to minutes of use or per megabyte of data. And then that means that the billing or charging system really has to have flexibility to support innovative, non-standard charging models, which they're going to roll out either now or in the future. So finally, CSPs also have a whole bunch of plans around billing and pricing features they could offer. As you can see, most say they already offer flexible price plans bundled with tech support, and the ability to make changes to plans. However, note the last feature here, which is the ability to tailor plans to individual SMEs' needs. And this is interesting because, as we've discussed, the issue here is not just the ability to do this, but whether you can do this at a low enough cost. Tailoring plans adds a lot of complexity, and as we know, complexity inevitably leads to increased costs. Telesperience believes that tailoring a plan is a compelling strategy, but we think that self-configuration of the plan is more viable and cost-effective for this sector than the CSP trying to do it themselves. There also have to be rules about how much tailoring is being permitted and who's allowed to do it. And all of this requires flexibility in the billing or charging system, including the ability to handle lots of frequent changes. Moving on to the SMEs themselves, we did some research. We've literally spoken to hundreds of SMEs and large enterprises over the last 2 years. And there are both differences and similarities in terms of what they want. For example, many businesses, though not all, would like this single throat to choke. And as we've discussed at the beginning of this section, the average European business has 6 employees and 2.3 communication service providers. The average large enterprise, according to our research, is 3.8 service providers. So just by consolidating this spend away from their rivals, CSPs can substantially increase their revenues and get those ARPUs up. But certainly the value here lies in services beyond connectivity, making that LTE network really work for you and be the enabler of a new way of doing business. A key service that many CSPs want is unified communication services, and this reinforces the ability for them to consolidate spending to a single provider. There's also a lot of trust there. The customers actually see it as a continuation of the key capabilities of the service providers. However, to move to value beyond connectivity, there needs to be trust and loyalty in order to build value. Sadly, there are still low levels of customer loyalty. For example, we found only 2 out of 10 SMEs have no plans to change service provider. Now, that doesn't mean they're all going to sort of hop service provider next month, but obviously this is a clear warning sign of a low level of loyalty there. And partly the problem here is that if the SME is not identified as a business, then the CSP cannot meet its needs effectively. So what's frustrating these SMEs? Well, the single biggest cause of frustration is the inability of CSPs to resolve problems quickly and effectively. Note that SMEs are not frustrated because there are problems, but because when problems occur, they're not dealt with in the manner they expect. Inaccurate charges and billings were the second biggest cause of frustration. But SMEs cannot be prioritised for problem fixing or upsold better SLAs if they're not identified in the first place as being businesses. That comes back to the key point we made earlier about you have to know who your customer is and where they are. Although this is a cost-conscious sector, note that clear pricing is rated far more highly than low pricing, which was only the 4th most important attribute for SMEs when selecting a service provider. In fact, service availability, quality and tariff plans are rated higher than having a low price. Neither do SMEs see handset selection as being a deal breaker. 8 out of 10 in our research say they'd rather have a cheaper service than their ideal handset. And what we might regard as fairly basic features, such as itemised and archived builds, are actually very important to SMEs, as are spending controls, which are more important to European SMEs currently than service controls. The exception there is the UK, which for some reason has very high interest in service controls. So in summary, you have to monetize LTE early. A large proportion of early revenues are going to come from the B2B sector. This sector is not homogeneous. CSPs need to think about how they address it, for example, using verticalization strategies. CSPs have tried to address this sector before and failed to do so profitably. They need to look at how they can reduce upfront costs and still market fast and provide the features that the SMEs want. Cloud and managed services offer the possibility of meeting both those goals. Billing and pricing features are valued in this sector, whether that's clear pricing, flexibility, self-configuration of bundles or controls, and so on. And it's not just about the lowest price, it's about the right price. And finally, CSPs need to think about the many differences between large enterprises, of which there's a relatively small number, and the majority of the B2B market, which is SMEs. And they need to be clear about the different requirements and opportunities in supporting B2B versus B2B strategies. And just to remind you before I hand over to Matt, if you'd like some more detailed thinking, facts and figures, then we have got some white papers available for you to download from the website.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. It's Gary Disley here, and I'm Marketing Director. No problem at all. I'm Marketing Director for Aircom Business. So I just want to take you through, I suppose, from a network and a communication provider's perspective, really what some of the key strategies that we're pursuing to link in really to what Teresa was just saying in terms of particularly around LTE. Before I do that, I just wanted to give you an introduction to who Aircom is. We are actually the principal provider of fixed line services in Ireland. We have a significant, about 60% market share, and we provide a range of services across voice, data, and ICT. We also have about 2.4 million customers. We have an extensive fixed and mobile network. We also have the largest Wi-Fi network in Ireland, and also the largest wholesale operator to other operators in the country as well. So a little bit of background in terms of Aircom Business and the journey that we've taken specifically for mobile. Mobile really is key for Aircom Business. We recently introduced a full suite of mobile services to our B2B sector other than small business in March of this year. So we've been in the market now for about 4 to 5 months, and we've been in the small business market for a little over 12 months. So really we see this as obviously a huge opportunity. Mobile is actually our biggest opportunity for growth. and in two ways, really. Really, the first is around being able to obviously grow a mobile revenue stream in its own right, but also, as Teresa touched on, the importance of and the need and the customer insight around wanting to have one provider of all communication services. So we believe that we're in a really strong position with our existing relationships around fixed, that we can then sell mobile into that existing base, which again not only provides a mobile revenue stream, but also helps to retain our fixed base and to build on that even further. So how do we plan to do that, and how have we begun to do that? Well, really, we see that there's four key areas that we want to focus on, underpinned by the area of service, which I'll touch on a little bit later. But again, really just reiterating in terms of the feedback that we get from customers around what's important to them, and certainly service, as Teresa has touched on, is absolutely key. So the first is around network. Again, not only from a standalone mobile perspective, but also from a fixed perspective as well. We believe that by bringing the investment that we make in both our fixed network, our mobile network, and our Wi-Fi network, that we truly are in the best position to be able to begin to bring a lot of these services together for our customers in a way that is absolutely seamless to them and ultimately gives them the best network experience regardless of where they are. It gives them true mobility in terms of from a mobile perspective. It gives them mobility from utilization of our Wi-Fi network, and ultimately gives them the best fixed experience on the back of our fiber broadband network. The second is to support that. So that really is, the way I describe it, is the highway in terms of what we give our customers. And then the next couple of bubbles there is really around what are they driving down that highway. And in order to do that, the next step is really to make sure that they have the right devices in order to do that. So obviously, that's not only from a handset perspective, but also the very quick acceleration that we're certainly seeing at a market level into the world of tablets in particular. And ultimately, business want to know the business benefit of bringing tablets into their organization. And so we are absolutely at the forefront of making sure that we have a tablet strategy that enables, regardless of what operating system the business or the enterprise is using, that we have the best solution in the market for them to utilize all of the benefits of that mobility and the power that network gives them in terms of really delivering tangible benefits to their business. The third is now that they have the network and they have the device in their hands, and what are they going to do with it, again, from a specific business perspective. And I think quickly the world of apps and cloud has become in many ways very exciting, but also at one level very confusing for the majority of our business customers. The majority of our customers are small enterprises. They don't have the luxuries of large IT services, and the vast majority of times it is actually up to the owner-operator or those very close to the day-to-day management of that business to actually work out what their telco and IT strategy is. So they have a lot of other things on their plate. So we really need to help them to declutter that area and really be explicit in terms of the types of apps that are available, the benefits of those apps, and why they should be using them. So we are taking a position, certainly in terms of being that educator, and really we have some initiatives coming up towards the end of this year, which is really about how do we take our business customers along that path of moving very much into the world of apps, in terms of how do they start to mobilize their business, both from a B2C perspective, but also to improve a lot of their own efficiencies. And that's something we're certainly seeing a lot of feedback is actually the communication of, or the use of apps as a communication tool to their end customers is one thing, but where they see a real benefit is how do they actually drive efficiencies into their own day-to-day running of the business by rolling out applications. And one example of that is a very large cleaning organization here with circa 5,000 employees are actually looking at rolling out a series of apps to help with things like timesheets, to manage attendance, and when there's other opportunities in terms of additional work, to be able to quickly communicate with their employees in terms of how they can take advantage of that. So again, two very different spheres, I think, in terms of the way apps are being used. And very similar with cloud as well. Again, has become quite cluttered in the marketplace, a wide range of providers and services that are available. And really, we're going to take the position in terms of, again, utilizing and joining the dots between the network, the device, and then actually how that then ties into the need to use cloud-based systems to improve efficiency. Again, we're seeing examples already of large sales teams that are out on the road and using cloud-based services to actually mobilize and to drive more efficiency into the organization. The fourth is ultimately, now that we have all this power and all of these tools in customers' hands, it's to ensure that when they do use them, that they're using them in a way that they have peace of mind in terms of that bill shock element that we've spoken about before. So we really ensure that our proposition development is aligned with this overall strategy around simplicity and ensuring that the customer has a level of protection from bill shock, so that they can do that and they can utilize and maximize the opportunities that we give them without having to worry about actually the potential costs of that to them or to their employees. And ultimately, this is all underpinned, and one of our key advantages in the market is, as I've mentioned, we have an existing very strong fixed relationship with these customers. We have a very integrated customer care and service organization with accreditation, and we are really leveraging that as we move into mobile to give the customer a sense that we certainly have the full end-to-end service operation under control, and really, again, to reiterate what Teresa was saying around utilizing and maximizing the opportunities around sort of becoming a trusted provider in the provision of all of those services. To touch on the network investment, again, we've actually developed a huge amount in terms of the investment we've put into the network, and we're investing over 1.5 million. And again, this is really going to allow customers to maximize the benefits of 4G, increase that flexibility of the workforce. An interesting point there is the enableization of the consumerization, which we're seeing, which is really about as these lines become blurred as we move into tablets and as customers and their employees tend to use their own personal devices more and more, we need to be able to provide them with a level of network capability that enables them to do that. Range of tablets, I've discussed that in terms of the customized solutions really is where that's key, and our ability to be able to maximize and leverage existing operating systems and to assure that we're aligned and we provide a full width and full breadth of services to our customers in terms of the operating systems that they're using. To build on the apps point, we actually have an apps database that we leverage. We know they're becoming increasingly important, and we actually have our own online apps hub, which customers then use to go in and have selected apps that we drive in terms of what we think is best for them from an efficiency perspective. And as I said, it's really ultimately very important that the value data propositions in terms of how simple they are, how cost effective they are, and again, really enabling businesses to do what they want to be able to do when they want to be able to do it, even outside of traditional borders. So, quickly aligning our roaming strategy with data and international calls. And also, again, I think Wi-Fi has a very important part to play in that, and is a very important education piece for our customers in terms of how they utilize that whilst traveling overseas. The integrated service is really, as I've mentioned, is built on sort of the one provider, one dedicated point of contact, and ultimately what this drives is the understanding of the business at a very deep level, because our account managers in some instances have a number of years' experience, very close to the customer's business. They know the strategy of the business, where it's wanting to head, and it's really up to us as a provider to give them those solutions to drive their business forward, and really that integrated service and support is really key to that. Another thing that is key is the ability to be able to operate that at speed, and as I said, we have been in the market since about March of this year, and one of the key things that we did was actually select MDS as the solution provider for our mobile offering. And there's a number of advantages to do that. The product suite was very strong in terms of things like the spend analytics module that customers were more and more requesting in terms of managing their own ability to be able to sort of manage their own spend. Speed to market really was a crucial factor for us as well. We wanted to be able to do this in a way that we can move quickly. And given that we were new to this, we thought we would start with that in mind. And MDS certainly can provide that and have shown that they can provide that to us. And ultimately, the deployment itself was incredibly smooth. It was a large, complex project that we were rolling out, and really the MDS solution for us has gone incredibly well, and really is one of the key underpinnings and enablers for us to drive the mobile strategy forward. So I'll pass over to Matt now, and I'll let Matt carry on with his with the presentation.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much, Gary. So I think as we start to get into the home straight of the webinar, really just a few slides here before we get to the Q&A. But there was a guy called Chris Pister back in the 1990s from University College Berkeley who came up with the concept of smart dust. And basically smart dust was a vision that he came up with that in the not too distant future, the whole world as we know it, both across business and also across our lives, will be sort of driven by a whole bunch of sensors, millions of sensors all connecting together. And we're pretty much getting towards that kind of tipping point. By 2020, it's estimated that there will be 50 billion connected devices across the globe. I think that presents both great opportunity for the service provider community, but also there are a whole bunch of challenges in there, as there always are when you see markets change and technology and adoption life cycles moving forward. So, obviously, machine-to-machine connectivity is something which has been spoken about a lot. The whole area of things like smart buildings, automotive with aftermarket telematics, logistics involving supply chain, utilities, healthcare, all of those kind of things, and then mobile commerce and over the top, based around sort of web-based payments, direct-to-operator billing, which is something that's come up in the last couple of years, and then right through to enterprise mobility and the emergence of unified communications and cloud-based services, and really the convergence of communication services and also IT services driven by the software as a service model. But these things, mean, one key thing to our industry, and that's the ability to recognize the opportunity around this Internet of Things and be able to monetize, price, bill, and then support a compelling customer experience that goes around this fast developing, changing, and more complex world that we're living in today. So we've kind of been here before. As an industry, we've seen various evolutions, and when it comes down to the business support system estate, the bottom line is, there's still applications that exist out there that are 10 years plus old, and then large packaged application suites right through to the leading edge software as a service models. But the bottom line is that applications do not evolve as fast as the business needs them. And that's something which is only going to increase and challenge as we move ahead over the next 3 to 5 years and over a longer time period. So it's really a case in terms of the IT estate and the IT estate strategy in looking at applications in the context of the business value that they provide. So basically aligning business processes and the actual applications in terms of how you want to support services, products, and customers. And it helps to kind of divide that down into 3 areas. One of them based around applications that provide a record kind of purpose, and then there are those that actually help you differentiate through your business processes, and then those that innovate. So perhaps BSS is one of those ones that needs to fall into differentiate both now and moving forward, and also then adding innovation into that as well, especially when you're looking at areas like software as a service and cloud-based models. So the bottom line is, and it always sounds a straightforward thing to say, but it's about making services and package of services easy to buy, for your customer and the target segment that you want to address. And it's not a case of one size fits all. And I think that's been highlighted absolutely. Looking at Teresa's and Gary's presentations, dealing with a consumer versus dealing with a business customer is different. Business customers have more complex requirements, but there's a greater opportunity to support them in the types of services that they require. And in terms of the actual small to medium enterprise, that's a combination of both IT and communication services, and having a very clear enablement strategy around specific target segments. So, for example, in retail, areas like mobile money and commerce are obviously have more of an emphasis than in some other vertical segments. So it's about really driving greater agility and the ability to package and provide and service and also support a greater rate of change into those kind of areas. And also, again, take direct customer feedback from those customers and bringing that in faster and in a more coherent way in terms of the way you actually develop services and solutions. And that's something a number of providers, and the term concept to cash and speeding concept to cash seems to be becoming more and more prevalent in the marketplace today. So one of the areas that has a sort of a profound effect on that obviously is cloud. And I think there's obviously a lot of hype around cloud, and there's lots of different levels of terminology, whether you're talking about cloud billing or cloud services enablement, and there's different kind of platform plays and different ways of looking at it. But for me, really, it's about the role that cloud can play in a BSS estate, which doesn't mean rip and replacing and chucking away that you've already got. And I think that one of the key things is that you can employ a really nice hybrid model, so in effect a cloud-enabled BSS model, which can really support both the requirements to for scalability, security, and being able to manage customer data in that very secure and tight environment, along with business processes. Again, in a service provider community, are you really going to take your core data, your core subscriber data, and put that into a public cloud? That's not really a viable solution today and may not be viable for many, many years to come. But at the same time, utilizing the economies of private cloud technology via the sort of trend around managed services, which can deliver up to 40% greater efficiency gains, and also as well employing cloud technology at the user interface level to really unite potentially disparate systems and different models within that existing BSS environment. So you effectively take, when you're looking at areas like everything from order management to billing, the whole order to cash cycle, actually using that software as a service model and that cloud model to sort of end the days of the swivel chair and having folks in selling contact centers moving across different screens, and then having a very kind of rigid and costly ability to update things and configure new views of the customer or new services. Those are the kind of things that you can really do. And so areas around there, and obviously looking at some of the things that the likes of Salesforce.com are doing, and around that kind of cloud-enabled, highly configurable user interface layer, I would say, and then driving that down into business processes and driving that down into the IT estate and some of those, I guess, more heavy iron-based systems that you have around there, potentially gives you the best of both worlds and also allows you to drive in new concepts like social CRM. So you're collating and collecting more and better customer feedback through things like social media channels and driving that back into your product development strategy, allowing you to get products and services to market faster and being able to price them in the right way and being able to offer them in the right way and then service the customer in the right way in the actual after-sale environment. So I think that's a key kind of model there that certainly we see in MDS as a vision, and also something which is really here today from an enablement perspective that provides the service provider community with much greater agility. So final word from a presentation perspective, and just by way of summary in many respects. So the services that are made available, and in terms of the agility to package services to customers today, you've got to be able to support a converged model from day one. Whether that's implemented on day one is another thing. But the ability to bring in, if it's purely mobile, prepay and post-pay together with the real-time charging and the policy elements within a workflow that is usable by the business people within the organization is absolutely key. And also, again, enabling triple and quad play offerings has to be driven by a single view of the customer, single bill, ability to manage a single portfolio of products and services and package them in a way that makes sense for the customer. The BSS can no longer be the bottleneck in launching new services. In many cases, it still takes too long to take a marketing idea and a marketing concept and actually turn that into a billable service. That has to change, otherwise opportunity will be lost. At the same time, business processes are key to an optimal customer experience. Speaking to a senior executive of one of the service providers in the UK, the insight there was, I don't really care about systems or technology, but it's about the business processes and being able to close the loop on those business processes that the systems drive in order to support the customer in a better and a more compelling way, which is where the differentiation strategy comes in. And again, using things like analytics, which is obviously a real hot area for the marketplace at the moment, to really ensure that everything is working as intended. That has to sit around the BSS and make use of the huge amount of data which is at hand, which can really pull through and improve and enhance the customer experience, but also give clues about the kind of services that are going to be required in the not too distant future. The emergence of MVNO, or the re-emergence of MVNO, I should say, is something which I think has given a great push into the marketplace. But again, that's creating challenges around having multi-tenant platforms that can support a number of MVNOs, supporting more complex reseller and revenue share and pricing and commercial models, those types of things. And the bottom line there is, whether you're a greenfield setting up an MVNO for the first time, or you're an operator putting in place an MVNE platform, these things have to be done properly out of the gate. I think the first round of MVNOs showed that you can't just take a couple of servers, put them in a data center, and kind of hope for the best. You've got to think about business processes first and systems second. The business processes are the things that really sort of drive the customer experience. I think that's something we still struggle with in the industry. And I think finally, the case in point made throughout this is really tapping into distinct market segments and not just understanding the criteria of a market segment on a marketing level, but actually driving that through, back into your BSS and your systems strategy, and bringing IT and marketing as organizations closer together in terms of the way they interact, and having more agility in the BSS to support offerings and the rate of change that is inevitably required with the plethora of services, the plethora of applications, and all of the great opportunities that we see. It's about understanding that one size does not fit all, which I think is a key theme that's come out through all of these presentations, these great presentations today. So that's the final word, I guess, from myself, and I'll now hand back over to the legendary Tony, who will run the Q&A session.
Thanks very much, Matt. I'm not sure how to take that, but I'm sure it was a compliment somewhere. Let's get straight on to the Q&A. I had quite a few good questions in, by the way. One to you, Matt, and it was very interesting, was one of your last points that you brought up. Why the re-emergence of MVNOs, and why now? You brought them up, and I agree there's a lot of activity, but what's triggering the new activity?
Yeah, well, I think it really comes around to one of the points that I just made. It's really focused on an understanding that there are distinct market segments in the marketplace that have particular requirements, and I think having an MVNO which can talk to a particular sector, and talk to a specific demographic around sort of market segment is absolutely key to sort of driving adoption. And I think a lot of greenfield MVNOs have sort of seen that as opportunity. I think we've learned a lot in the marketplace over the last few years as well. So I think the systems are also better as well. And I think there's more confidence in being able to start up an MVNO and support a service and stand up a service, and I think that's key. And I also think that there's a lot of really strong brands out there who have seen the success of over-the-top players. If you think of things like Spotify and those kind of other types of service, and I think that's given the market a new confidence in the ability to go out and use strong brands that attract a certain market segment and really capitalize on that. And to be honest, long may it be so. It's a great development for the market, and it makes it exciting. and it makes it even more competitive. But ultimately, it should mean in better and more, more roundly packaged propositions for for consumers and businesses.
Great. The Teresa Cottam fan club is active out there today, and somebody's written in and said, Teresa, splendid research and analysis as usual, but it also came with a question. The question was, can you explain more? Here's the distinct question. Can you explain more about the differences between, and give us some examples of B2B and B2B2C services that CSPs can provide, particularly over LTE that you were talking about earlier?
Oh, that's a great question, Tony. Thanks. Well, B2B services, as we said, are things that help a company become more operationally efficient in our view and more productive. So if we specifically look at LTE and what that has to offer as opposed to some of the alternatives like Wi-Fi, for example, that higher bandwidth and lower latency means companies can now access and use more applications from mobile devices when they're out of the home or the office. I mean, for a micro business, that the home is their office more often than not. So I think there's two key differences here that we can focus on and think about. You don't have to search for a Wi-Fi hotspot if you're using, mobile while you're out and about. And although, in London we all know that there's lots of hotspots and it's fantastic and you can usually find one and get one free with coffee and all the rest of it, if you go elsewhere in the country, they can be a bit thinner on the ground. So convenience is a big benefit, that you've got your instant connectivity. The other, of course, is security. So when you use a public Wi-Fi hotspot, it might not be secure, and you don't have to go through that process of authenticating yourself onto the network because you're already, logged into the mobile network. So I think those are two key benefits, that ease of access to applications, etc., that are different to the Wi-Fi. Now, the new opportunity is to use mobile for B2B2C applications. These are things like, they're about helping businesses sell more to their customers. So these are things like, it could be mobile advertising or coupons, it could be providing mobile-friendly websites for customers to browse, including providing the transactive capabilities that businesses need and often don't have. This part of the market is really being driven by the consumers who are literally dragging small businesses into the mobile future. And we hear about this mobile-first strategy. It doesn't matter how reticent these small businesses are, they're being dragged there by their own customers who want to do everything mobile. And for small businesses to compete with their bigger rivals, they're going to have to take that leap to mobile. Many of them don't even have fixed internet sites, and they're going to need to have mobile internet sites. They're not mobile-savvy people, and yet they're going to need to do this. So having these sort of services provided for them by somebody they can trust is actually very attractive to them. And there's a whole load of other stuff. But I hope that gives you some ideas, Tony.
That's great, Teresa. We've also had a request from people asking if they could get links to some of the research that has been quoted in your part of the presentation. I'm sure we can make that available to them afterwards. Is that okay? We
absolutely do. If you'd like to get a copy of the research, then feel free to email us, or, as Tony said, we'll make sure the links are available. The two papers that we've just finished on the SME market and on LTE monetization, you can download immediately from the MDS website for free. But for the data, come to us at Telesperience Editorial at telesperience.com and email us, and we'll get that to you.
Sounds good. And also for the other questions regarding whether this webinar will be available to replay at a later date, yes, we do make our webinars available to you, and all of those that are registered will get a link to that in the coming days or so. So don't worry, some of you had some difficulty getting on. You won't miss out. I've got a question for Gary. Oh, Gary, this is a good one for you. The service proposals nor problem descriptions that you gave seems new to some of the webinar listeners today. One guy says he's seen all of that for over 15 years now. So what has changed in Aircom to believe you're able to address this successfully now? Well, that's a tough one.
That's a tough one. Yeah, I mean, I think for me personally, I think there's three key things that have changed, which makes us being able to deliver against this. I think one is the nuts and bolts is in terms of wanting to deliver value into the market. I think by Aircom coming in with a mobile proposition enables us to deliver as a new entrant very aggressive mobile pricing, which is one of our key pillars. And what that does is ultimately taps into, particularly with the current economic environment, customers wanting and searching for value more and more. So by us bringing together those two and delivering that in a way that's incredibly cost effective and good value for the company that's purchasing an office, I think that's one of the things that has changed substantially. I think the second is, again, the level of complexity, I think you would have to say over the last 15 years has increased with the things that we spoke about in terms of cloud and apps and the number of different operating systems that are out there. So I think the experience that we bring in bringing all of those together for customers and distilling that and knowing their business, so ease of doing business, I think is probably the second piece that we think we can now bring those together. And really ultimately I think the third is the lines between fixed and mobile are becoming more and more blurred in terms of everything we've spoken about today, in terms of capabilities around speed, around the way that customers are using the two technologies almost interchangeably. So again, I think that we can leverage that, and things have changed over the last few years to enable us to really enter the mobile market and start to bring this together a lot more closely.
Good answer, Gary. I can see why you're in that role. Well done.
I hope that answers the question.
I've got one here or probably best for Matt to answer this one, because at the very end of your presentation, Matt, you mentioned briefly some of the pressures that OTT, over-the-top players, are bringing operators. One question here is, do you think that's the biggest challenge or the biggest pressure on operators at the moment, or are there others?
Well, to be honest, if you think of over the top, then for operators it should be seen as a challenge. At the end of the day, all over the top services need to have a level of OSS, BSS infrastructure behind them, and they need that kind of enablement capability. And very often, there needs to be a network that sits behind it. So from that perspective, and looking to the opportunity, I guess, into the wholesale departments and the wholesale organizations of operators, there's an opportunity to reach out and put some of these new models in place and really drive greater levels of wholesale business for the operator community. But at the same time, for those that either can't or aren't willing to get there quickly, that kind of thing, then sure, there's additional pressure there, because it's another flavor of service provider which will put both service and competitive pressure onto the existing service provider's business in terms of what they provide. So it's probably not the biggest pressure, but it's certainly one of those from a competitive perspective. I think the biggest amount of pressure comes back into the IT estates, and again, anyone obviously working on the IT side, trying to manage vast estates of different platforms and applications. And trying to really sort of glue those together with succinct and complete business processes. Those are hard things to manage and hard things to change. So from that perspective, that's where a lot of the ultimate pressure ends up. So there has to be more agility driven down into that area. So I wouldn't say it's the biggest pressure, but it certainly is one of the biggest pressures. But the ultimate requirement is you've got to turn that into an opportunity, and the opportunity is absolutely there.
Okay. Well, look, I'd like to firstly thank all our presenters today. We've come to the top of the hour, and a lot of people will be dropping off the call now. As I said to you, we will have the webinar available to you to listen to later on. And if you have any questions, please feel free to send them to us, either with the link that you had from the invitations, or simply sending something to tpoulos@tmforum.org, and I'll pass that on to the relevant players. So thank you all. This webinar was sponsored by MDS. We've had guest speakers from Aircom, Telexperience, and of course the TM Forum. Thank you, everybody, and hope to see you, or not see you, but have you again on another webinar shortly. Thanks again. Bye for now.